Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning, and thank you so much to Solaria for hosting this, and we'll have a few more words about them as we go along. And I am Senator Ellen Corbett, and I'm joined by Assemblymember Bob Wykowski. We are very proud supporters of green and clean technology and also proud representatives of this part of the state of California. We want to thank you for coming to the inaugural meeting of the Select Committee for Green Jobs, Solar, Wind, and Clean Technologies. And this committee was formed to create a forum for dialogue on this important sector of our California economy. We're here today to listen to clean tech companies and the community to become informed about this growing industry and to create more jobs in California and also meet our environmental standards and needs. Today, we'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Nancy Pfund. She is the founder and managing partner of Dbl Investors. It's a venture capital firm located in San Francisco whose goal is to combine top-tier financial returns with meaningful social, economic, and environmental returns in the regions in which it invests. Ms. Pfund currently sponsors or sits on the board of directors of several innovative companies, including Bright Source Energy, Solar City, Solaria, Primus Power, Ecologic Brands, OPX Biotechnologies, eMeter, and prior to the public offering, Tesla Motors and Pandora Media. Ms. Pfund speaks frequently on subjects relating to environmental investing, environmental policy, and mission-related investing. Ms. Pfund recently released an important white paper entitled, "What Would Jefferson Do? The Historical Role of Federal Subsidies in Shaping America's Energy Future." Her work offers an interesting historical look at federal subsidies for energy policy. So let's welcome Nancy. I know what we hear today will be very enlightening. Thank you for joining us, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Senator Corbett and Assemblymember Wykowski, for having me here today. I just want to make sure, can people hear me, or should I raise this a little bit? Everything okay? And thank you, Solaria, for hosting us for this important topic. It's one that we, at Dbl Investors we're very committed to investing in innovative companies that are helping us address climate change and reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and so it's great to be here today. I just want to take 1 minute to introduce my colleagues from Dbl Investors who are here today: Mark Perutz, Lisa Hagerman, Sarah Ham, and Patrick Sagisi are here, and so ask them any questions that you like at the break. And I do want to point out that we had a wonderful summer intern this past July and August, Ben Healy, and he was my co-author for the report that I'm going to touch on today on subsidies over history. So what I thought I would do is just spend a couple minutes describing what Dbl Investors is, just to give you the context of why we take the time to study these things. Talk about the role of subsidies in energy subsidies in the history of the United States, and then move into kind of where we are today and what's working and what isn't as a prelude for the great panels that you're going to have after this. Because the reason we wanted to study subsidies in our nation's history is because we face a difficult economic climate for new energy transitions today into renewables, and so it's important to learn, really separate the rhetoric from the facts in terms of what makes energy tick in this society and how we can nurture new, less polluting, less damaging forms of energy. So that was kind of the rationale. So let me just take a minute and feel free to ask me any questions during any of this. I just want to introduce Dbl Investors. We are a San Francisco-based double bottom line venture capital firm. Double bottom line means that we pursue both financial return and social return. We work to drive social, economic, and environmental improvement in the regions in which we invest. We have 2 funds under management. The first one was started in 2004 and has enjoyed very strong top-tier returns. Our second fund closed at $150 million earlier this year. And our companies, which you'll hear about briefly, are out there pursuing new technologies, new energy solutions, and creating very high-quality jobs. Just didn't have room to list all of our companies, but those are some of the logos down at the bottom of the page. And of course, we have Primus Power and Solaria here today that are 2 of our companies as well. So our first fund focused, we were all working at J.P. Morgan at the time. We spun out in 2008. It has 18 portfolio companies in it. It was $75 million in size, and it had a focus on Bay Area companies. Our second fund is double the size, focused on California and the West, and we currently have 11 investments in that fund. It's a relatively new fund. We pursue community impact, and we measure it and monitor it. Many of our companies are located in or near low to mid-income areas to drive economic development and job creation and a tax base in those areas. So that's a big part of our focus. And we have created, in the first fund, we will be, when the fund is fully invested and closed, we will have created approximately 7,000 jobs, which is about $10,000 a job if you look at the $75 million total size of the fund, which is a very high capital to jobs productivity ratio. And these are quality jobs with benefits, with health care, and often with some kind of stock compensation. Interesting development in our region, which we're very excited about, is that clean tech is changing the look of our region in terms of course, we have a strong tech and biotech heritage, but we are developing a preeminent clean tech profile as well. And this is just our little firm, just our companies, starting up at one of our first investments, which was Powerlight, which was sold to SunPower up in Richmond, Bright Source Energy in Oakland, Ecologic Brands, which is a compostable packaging company in Oakland, Primus Power in Hayward, Solar Cities in San Mateo, Tesla Motors is in Palo Alto, but has, of course, its big plant in Fremont, took over the NUMMI plant. Solaria right here, and Solidigm and Milpitas and Selexant in San Jose. You can tell that we're developing a corridor of clean tech expertise and leadership and job creation. And so this is something that the private-public partnership is creating because venture capital invests in companies in this region to pursue growth and successful corporate development. But public policy drives a lot of this to help our state comply with the various environmental laws that we have pioneered. So, and I'll talk more about that. Just our companies are getting a lot of recognition from the various publications and contests, which is good for the region. Here's just a few photos. This is one of our companies, Bright Source Energy, that makes large-scale solar thermal plants in desert areas like the Mojave, building gigawatt-scale solar power to complement the distributed rooftop solar. A bipartisan effort. This plant took a lot of, in the Mojave, took a huge amount of heavy lifting at the state and federal and local level. And at the groundbreaking last year, the governor helped to celebrate. Solar City, on the other end of the spectrum, is a financer and installer of rooftop solar. And this company in San Mateo, when we invested, had about 25 employees 5 years ago, and now has over 1,200 employees. And talk about job growth. Very high-quality jobs, a very successful company that's helping make solar more affordable by creating financing products like solar leases that avoid the upfront cost of solar. This is one of our newest investments, a company called Ecologic in Oakland that makes a compostable, recyclable package for things like laundry soap, milk, diaper wipes, whatever. Packaging is a multi-trillion dollar a year business, and we use a lot of plastic in those laundry jugs and milk jugs that are bad for the environment. And so this kind of packaging reduces the carbon load by up to 70%. Seventh Generation is our first product to use the package. You can find this in Whole Foods and soon in Target. So that was started by a woman in downtown Oakland. Tesla, we're all familiar with that success story. This is the old NUMMI plant where they're developing the manufacturing line for the Model S four-door car, which will be coming on the released sometime mid next year. And then just one company on the sustainability side of what we do, Revolution Foods in Oakland, serves healthy lunches to low-income school children and does it at a price point that is scalable. Started off with one charter school in Oakland and now serves over 120,000 meals a day and drives education about nutrition and a sustainable food supply. So these are just a few of the companies which and has over 700 employees starting from zero just a few years ago. So let's talk about the role of policy in fostering companies like these and growing job creation. Basically, today's federal renewable energy policies are not enough to drive clean tech development on their own. And they also provide, because what policies there are federal, they don't give any special advantage to California. There is no near-term consistent federal policy that puts a price on carbon and there's no national renewable portfolio standard. So we really can't look to the federal government right now for the kind of support that this industry needs. There are investment tax credits and production tax credits, but they expire at certain points. There's always a flurry of activity to renew them, and so while they help the industry, they hold us back in a way because of the kind of perturbations to good planning that they create by virtue of the fact that they expire at regular intervals. So it really does depend on California and to keep leading the way, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one thing I want to point out, and this is the subject of our story in the report we did, which is called "What Would Jefferson Do?" The historical role of federal subsidies in shaping America's energy future. This is on our website if you'd like to take a look at it. We wanted to understand really why are subsidies so controversial for solar and wind and renewables, and is that really the right reaction to subsidies? We had a suspicion that, and of course there's been a lot of talk about how other forms of fossil fuel energy like coal and oil get subsidies as well. And so we wanted to really see, well, what are the facts in terms of our nation's history? So we went back in time and looked at what happened every time a new energy source was introduced, and we quantified what were the subsidies. In terms of wood and coal, we were not able to quantify to the extent that we did with oil and gas and nuclear, which the charts which describe that I'll show you in a minute, because we weren't able to access the historical data, and it may not exist in the way that we want to. But just so you know, our nation, what we found is that our nation's history is characterized by subsidizing new energy sources, and we've done it from the 18th century on. It's just a fact that this is not something that is new to solar and wind. This is part of our economic history. And with timber, it was things like land grants that helped provide access to corporate development of wood. In the case of coal, it was huge amounts of state-level subsidies, tax exemptions, surveys that states did to show coal companies where the coal was. A lot of very important subsidy work done at the state level, and then tax exemptions as well, eventually at the national level. And, of course, the whole federal government supported the development of railroads, which were critical to transporting coal. And even today, the tax treatment of coal has resulted in about $1.9 billion over the past 10 years in the form of subsidies. So these numbers are large, and what we did is understand that it was important not just to look at today, but to go back in time and see what happened when oil was introduced in those first 15 years. What happened when nuclear was introduced in those first 15 years? Because that's where we are in solar and wind. We're just in that early process. And so what we found is that current subsidies are dramatically lower than what we gave to oil and gas. During the first 15 years of each subsidy's life, the federal commitment to oil and gas was 5 times greater than it is today to renewables, and in the case of nuclear, 10 times greater. I mean, these are huge, in the case of nuclear, order of magnitude differences in terms of the support that they received. And in terms of looking at support for renewable energy, in inflation-adjusted dollars, the nuclear spending averaged $3.3 billion over the first 15 years of its life every year. Oil and gas subsidies averaged almost $2 billion, and renewables today are less than $0.4 billion. So this is staggering in terms of its impact. It's showing that regardless of what you hear on the news that criticizing subsidies, we're actually under-subsidizing compared to our fossil fuel and nuclear comparisons. And these charts just show this is energy subsidies as a percentage of the federal budget in the first 15 years of oil and gas, nuclear, biofuels, and renewables. You can see, skyscrapers compared to, barely noticeable subsidies for renewables today. And it's important to understand that history is giving us a message here that one of the reasons oil and gas and nuclear became successful is because of this level of support. Here you can see this is a little more scattered, but it just compares early federal subsidies in terms of again, the first 30 years, and you can see where that circle is, that even during the Depression, when oil and gas subsidies went way down, because, of course, the economy was in the tank, they're still higher as a percentage than the renewable energy subsidies enjoyed in that period of year 12 to 15. So any way you slice this, you're looking at a picture that has undervalued the subsidy to the role of subsidies in economic growth. And the dotted lines, because renewables are so new, is really if we would continue the kind of subsidies that oil and nuclear got, look how much higher they would be than the rate they're on now. So this is a disturbing picture, just because if it worked for oil and gas and nuclear, it could work for renewables, and so we need to address this. And the issue is that these subsidies are going on and on for these now very mature industries. Those ratios that I described are still in effect today. So what we have seen is that basically the conclusion of this study is that energy subsidies are as American as apple pie. We've done this since the country's earliest days, but the trick is knowing when to turn them off. And the fact that oil and gas and nuclear continue to enjoy the increased level of subsidies today versus when they are mature versus the fledgling renewables industry is just really a question. Should we be doing that? At the same time that subsidies are being debated today, and in some sectors criticized, we are seeing the benefits of these, albeit smaller subsidies that we've been applying, the investment tax credit and rebates and such. And the solar industry is really becoming an important force in our economy. They're adding jobs faster than the rest of the economy. They're employing over 100,000 people in the United States across manufacturing, installation, sales, and distribution. Over 25,000 of those jobs are in California. The industry expects to add another 24,000 jobs in this year, a 24% growth rate, at a time, of course, where many industries are hemorrhaging jobs. And an important point is that it's not just the sunniest states that are growing the jobs. Certainly, California is sunny and is growing jobs. But the 4th and 5th ranked states in terms of solar growth are Pennsylvania and New York, ahead of Florida, Texas, and New Mexico. And what that says is that it's policy that matters. It's not just the sun. And these are the states where there are policies that promote renewable development. In terms of putting together, looking at history and looking at where we are today, what I'd like to suggest is that the key to California winning the race for clean technology into creating quality local jobs is twofold. We need to continue to drive demand for clean technology, and we need to incent businesses to locate in California. And I'm going to go into a few details on this. We face aggressive competition in terms of this industry's development from other states, Mississippi, Oregon, and others, but also from other nations, China and India. And so what I'd like to spend the rest of this time is to really pursue some ideas for how we can balance both creating demand and keeping businesses in California. California has long been a leader in driving clean technology demand. We have programs like the California Solar Initiative, the Million Solar Roofs. We have the Renewable Portfolio Standards, and now we have the implementation of AB 32, the cap and trade carbon reduction laws. So we should be proud of ourselves for having done all that. This slide just goes into a little bit more detail in terms of the history of these programs. The Solar Initiative, the Renewable Portfolio Standards that we're upping to 33%, carbon trading system that has just last week been announced in terms of creating an economic vehicle for corporations and utilities to reduce their carbon footprint. And then we've also had the California Energy Commission lead with the Public Interest Energy Research Program, the PEER program, which historically has given grants and loans to innovators in renewable energy and helped companies grow. And Solaria's CEO, who's not able to be here today, Dan Sugar, who used to work was the president of Powerlight. Powerlight received some of those early PEER program grants, and if Dan were here, he would tell you how fundamental they were to the success of that company's growth. And Powerlight was one of the first big integrators in the country, and eventually sold to SunPower. So those are some of the star programs that California has. What happens is that reauthorization of these programs is critical, and yet sometimes gets hung up. And certainly the PEER program has been, in terms of kind of looking at the role of government in our state, has been hung up because of the public goods charge delay in failure to get reenacted in the legislature. I believe that this will be taken care of through administrative efforts and working with the legislature. But this is the kind of thing that when you pull the plug on a program like that, you're pulling the program on a lot of what is working in the state in terms of getting renewables launched. One thing that might be helpful in pursuing these kinds of PEER programs going forward is to tie together and connect the R&D, the policy, and the investment community a little bit more, perhaps through an advisory board or some formal dialogue among those constituencies, because that way we're all going to be understanding the needs of each group. So that would be one recommendation that I would suggest we consider. We just had an example of the Self-Generation Incentive Program, SGIP, which is driving more storage to make renewables more valuable in terms of extending their utility across all hours of the day. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this because we have some experts on the panels later that will. But this program has been improved in terms of some recent rulings, but was put on hold for about a year while they worked on that. And so we can survive those things, yes, but it would be good to have consistency and not have this stop-start approach to some of these policies, especially as I described earlier when fossil fuels and nuclear don't have those kinds of limitations. And then finally, net metering is a key aspect of our law in terms of allowing power to be sold back at retail rates when you have solar or wind to the utility. That helps to monetize the value of renewables, and what exists now are caps in terms of how much you can sell back. And so exploring those caps and recognizing how they might be diminishing the value of renewables and hampering its growth is something that we would advise that we really take a close look at. And I know you'll be talking about that later, but I just want to highlight how important that is. We also see challenges to enforcing requirements and executing on renewable commitments. This adds time, risk, and deters investment. We see that in terms of the RPS, the standards for percentages of renewables, that not everything that is allocated to the renewable portfolio standard ends up getting built. There's permitting, there's infeasibility, there's misaligned incentives. There are a lot of impediments. And so what that gives is the opportunity for the off-takers, often those are utilities, but not always, it gives them an excuse to say, well, yeah, I signed up for that, but you're delayed or times have changed. And it puts a risk on the actual building of these larger scale renewable projects. And so, and that, in addition to environmental challenges or lawsuits, really creates a huge level of risk. And so to the extent we can get consistent enforcement of the RPS and not allow people to go sideways on commitments, that would be, and create a remedy for those kinds of situations would be very useful. Infrastructure is a major challenge for clean energy companies. For large-scale development, like the BrightSource plant or the large-scale utility solar, it can often take 8 years to plan, permit, finance, and build transmission and the generation. And these, if you were able to put an actual date where it had to be completed, that would force the issue. Right now, it's very often it just goes on and on and on, and that kind of risk really scares investment dollars away. For smaller scale and rooftop development, you have the problem of the inefficient local permitting, the inspection process. It's different in Fremont than it is in Milpitas, than it is in Palo Alto. It just adds a huge cost to, a more invisible cost to homeowners and residential solar. Some studies have shown that whole inconsistency in the local permitting and inspection process adds 50 cents a watt to residential solar installations, equating to about $1 billion tax on solar over a 5-year period. So all of that inefficiency adds up, and again, is a hindrance, which could be addressed through policy innovation. So let's talk about jobs now, because that is really what this state and our country is facing a critical shortage of employment opportunities. So I've just shown that California has led on the demand side of the equation. Now what California has to do to retain and attract businesses is look at incentives that level the playing field with competitive offers from other places, other foreign countries, and states. What's happening now is that international and domestic competition for clean technology is significant and it's very well structured. And I'm going to tell some stories that I've heard about that are from our portfolio, but just when I tell them, understand that every other venture capitalist, if he or she was here, would tell you similar stories. This is just not us. What's happening is that clean tech companies are, and you saw that map, we have a great cluster of clean tech companies in our state. A lot of the R&D is done here, the early development. But what's happening is that the execution and manufacturing is getting stolen, and it's going other places. And this happens at the international and the domestic level. In the case of international competition, we have China and India that are willing to subsidize their own development by investing abroad. And I'll give you a few examples of that. But we also have our own government programs like OPIC or the Ex-Im Bank that help companies with very well-known programs apply to develop their products or manufacturing in developing countries. Now, this is a great thing, and we need more of these programs. But what it does is it directs development into other regions. And at the same time, domestically, other states are taking a page out of that playbook, and they're developing very specific, transparent approaches to attracting our companies elsewhere. So I want to give just an example from our portfolio. Solidigm is headquartered in California, in Milpitas. And what it does is it makes electrochromic windows, which are basically windows that dim and lighten based on heat and light. And so when it gets too hot and bright, they get like your sunglasses, they dim and prevent a lot of that heat from coming in without obstructing the view. It's a wonderful new building technology that results in energy efficient buildings because you don't have as much heating and cooling need in the building, and so you use less power. So what happened with Solidigm is they looked around. They needed to build a facility to make these windows, didn't really get much interest from the state, and ended up putting a manufacturing plant in Olive Branch, Mississippi, because Mississippi came after them and said, we will give you a $40 million long-term, low-interest loan. We're going to give you a $4 million grant. We're going to help you with training, just a package that they couldn't refuse. And in exchange for Solidigm committing capital to invest there in building the plant. This plant is going to create 300 jobs, and they're not going to be in California. They're going to be in Mississippi. And already the state of Mississippi has ordered their first set of windows that are going to come out of that plant to go into a local community college or school. So Mississippi has 5% of the GDP and 8% of the population of California, and yet it has attracted 6 high-profile clean tech companies in the past year. And we just list them. Solidigm is one, a San Jose company called Twin Creeks Technologies, Styon, a Texas company. This is not an isolated case. This is basically a state deciding that it's going to win the race for job creation and betting on clean tech. So it's a very sobering story. Oregon, just our neighbor up north, is also prioritizing clean tech jobs, has worked on the demand development that California has pioneered, has an RPS, has a feed-in tariff, but is also creating cash incentives for solar development, energy loan programs with long repayment periods at low interest rates, business energy tax credits. The list goes on in terms of a very structured, transparent program that they are offering to companies. So these are the kinds of programs that attract the interest of people like me, companies like ours, because capital is so scarce in a young company, and so any kind of leveling of that playing field against more traditional industries is going to be very, very useful. Now, in addition to our states that are looking at our innovation and wanting a piece of it for their own economic development needs, we also have the Chinese governments consistently offering very generous incentives and capital investment to our companies. I'm not going to name the companies that I'm talking about, but you could open the paper and read it almost every day. We have a technology company in our portfolio that's getting a $250 million loan and direct cash investment. We've got another company that's creating a joint venture with a Chinese city and getting cash for that in exchange for putting some of their manufacturing in China. I could go on and on about companies in the clean tech space that are getting these kinds of deals, and not that they don't want to stay in California, and certainly Solaria is a great example of a leader that has manufacturing just in the back here. But what I'm saying is it's very difficult to not say no to these various programs. I want to end with a positive note and remind people that we can say yes to manufacturing in California, and we've done it just down the road here. Tesla, the Fremont assembly plant where they're making the Model S, which is what that picture represents, is a huge success story. Tesla's Bay Area factories will result in 1,200 auto assembly jobs by early 2012, and it's estimated that having that plant is preserving or creating 10,000 jobs in the network of suppliers, so a huge win for the region. Having been an early investor in Tesla, I just want to point out that this took years of work and dedication. We started working on that plant in 2006 and figuring out, and we had so many offers from Mexico, from China to take that plant. But we wanted to be here. It was important to be near R&D, and we wanted to see if we could make that work. So in 2006, we started talking to various cities to try to get incentives. And the city of Pittsburgh, California, actually stepped up to the plate, and we developed a great package. And then what happened is that New Mexico came in and upped the offer to a $20 million package. And these packages are combinations of grants, enterprise zone incentives, redevelopment office programs, rent forgiveness, things like that. And what it does is that you just put that into your spreadsheet, and you show that if you get all of those, you can actually develop a car at the same cost as if you went to Mexico, and you have all of these great benefits of being here as opposed to thousands of miles away. So that's the work that gets done. New Mexico didn't pan out, and then, as you may recall, San Jose made a bid for the plant, and the site that was offered there didn't work out for various reasons. There were efforts in Southern California. But then in 2009, Tesla did receive an advanced technology vehicle manufacturing program grant from the DOE, and that helped them develop the Palo Alto facility, and then the NUMMI deal got done. Alameda County officials, Governor Schwarzenegger, state legislatures, officials, and elected really combined to make this work, because it was too important to fail. And the kinds of efforts that took place included using the CAFTA, Advanced Transportation and Alternative Energy Financing Authority, that resulted in exempting the company from some of the sales and use tax up, and that was worth about $320 million, which is a big incentive and helped to make the numbers work for Tesla. So we can do it. We just need collective will. We need to do the math, to be creative, and recognize that putting these packages together is how everyone else in the world is doing it. As I've shown you, we need to do it as well. So just in closing, I want to say that we have 3 companies in our portfolios, and any other venture capitalists would add their own, but Solaria, Ecologic Brands, and a wind company we've just invested in, Flow Design, that are all considering expansion. And California, of course, they would like to include that as part of their expansion plan. But in order to do that, the numbers have to work. You can't just want it to happen because you want California to succeed. It has to make business sense. So in conclusion, I just want to remind people that supporting our nation's new energy technologies has been a central theme in America's history, and today should be no exception. Renewable energy and other sustainable industries are poised to drive significant economic growth and are already creating over 100,000 quality jobs. California is a clean tech leader, but we can't rest on our laurels. Competition comes from domestic and international sources. And for decades, we have led with the policies that drive clean tech demand creation here and across the world. We've been copied. Now we really need to sit down and make sure we keep the jobs that those policies have created. We keep them here, and we keep our economy thriving. So, thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions or whatever you'd like to do.
Of course. Are there any questions from the audience? Please.
Sure.
Please, just state your name before you ask your question.
My name is Ryan Zion. I'm with the Alameda County Workforce Investment Board. And we do a lot of retraining for laid-off workers from either NUMMI or Solyndra now, because there were a lot of production people that were laid off that weren't the higher skilled people. So that was my question. I mean, I know that, as you mentioned, quite a lot of new jobs will be created for the renewable sector in the Bay Area or in California. But what does it look like for entry-level jobs, and what kind of training do you see that would be beneficial for them? Because I know Senator Corbett has NUMMI very dear to her heart, and there are a lot of people there that would love to make a transition into the sustainable sector.
Well, it's a great question. It takes a combined effort to, say, take the displaced NUMMI workers, and when Tesla is ready to actually hire the assembly line workers, get them into those jobs. And I'm sure, and I know that the companies and the various public sector training constituencies are at work at that, because it's a win-win. Not that Tesla will need the 5,000 employees yet that work there, but they're going to need a chunk of them, and to have people that have already worked in that field is important. And yes, it takes training to migrate from a gas to an electric framework, but that training is very doable. And so what you often see is that's part of the incentive that certainly Mississippi and other states offer, and California does it as well, to help a company with those training dollars and programs to enable them to hire. And certainly if we can get companies like Solaria or Solidigm in the future to put, or any of these companies really, to put factories here, the training dollars are well spent, and through federal and state programs already exist. So it's just knitting together the public sector resources with where the jobs are going.
Yes, please introduce yourself.
My name is Lauren Faber with the Renewable Defense Fund. Thanks, that was a really great presentation.
Thank you.
A couple of questions. One, you mentioned the lack of a carbon price across the U.S., although beginnings of one in California. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, would you say that given sort of the diversity of policies in California with renewable portfolio standards and others, do investors sort of visibly respond to a carbon price itself, or is it really the combination? Or how much weight does the explicit carbon price give to some decisions? And then also, I'm really interested in the study that you talked about on subsidies, energy subsidies, and specifically the point about when is it appropriate to eliminate them or ratchet them down? And does that study go into any policy recommendations?
I'll answer the second question first. We decided to provide information for policymakers and the public, and as opposed to be advocates of one policy or another, because we thought when we saw how meaningful the information was and how staggering the difference in the subsidies for old versus new technologies, we said, well, this has to get out there. Certainly, our view is that at some point the subsidies have to stop, because otherwise it's a disincentive to new entrants, and a subsidy should help an energy industry grow rather than keep it propped up over decades and almost a century in some cases. So I think it's that would be, we envision that would be the next discussion to have. And certainly there are hearings in Washington that are addressing that. But we really do need to see if there are programs, tax treatments that coal and oil and gas have received, and nuclear insurance treatment on nuclear power plants, for example, that perhaps we should begin to wean ourselves from. So I think we don't have specific recommendations, but certainly a warning sign comes out of this report in that if we continue to heavily subsidize old players, it works to the disadvantage of new entrants. In terms of the carbon price and whether investors pay attention to that, emphatically yes. We have invested in the sector with RPS and with rebates and such, and the tax credit, because that was good enough and that's all we had. But if you look at Europe, where there is a market, there is a price on carbon, they're much more advanced than we are in terms of their adoption of renewables, and they're enjoying all of the benefits of that. So what the investment community is excited about, and certainly California is a large enough state, the largest economy in the country, where you're going to see some real consequences to having a carbon price. So I think that we could do without it, but it's going to be much more compelling to have that, and the whole world is watching, frankly. And as to whether the market is large enough to matter to investors, what you typically see is that when California does something, it gets copied eventually. So makes your job that much more important. And that, combined with the fact that California is such a large market, it's big enough to make a difference. So especially when you add on all the other programs that we have. So it's critically important.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nancy. We can have questions a little later on in the program, but in order to stay on schedule, I think we'll move on a bit. Let me just thank you, Nancy, on behalf of myself and Assemblymember Wachowski for a great presentation, giving us a historical perspective on what's been going on in the various different utility and energy industries. And I want to especially thank you for ending on a high note with the successes at Tesla. We're very glad to see that they are doing well. And also thank DBL for its commitment to allowing California industries to grow, and also your environmental stewardship, which is also so important for this region. We very much appreciate having you here today.
It's an honor to be here.
All right. We are going to take just about a 4-minute break in order for the panelists to take their seats for the first panel discussion, and we will be right back to get started with that first panel. Thank you all very much.